To unpack the text a little bit, we start again in that hostile environment of the heath, separate from the area of battle. And we start with the three witches. They have this little dialogue here where they ask, where have you been? What have you been doing? And it shows sort of their monstrosity, but also to a degree shows how much influence they have over the lives of humans. There's a fickleness to them, a sort of whimsy, where if they are insulted, these elemental forces, if they're insulted, they take vengeance. Some people have actually speculated that to some degree the three witches are like a trope, that is a turning of the divine three, the Trinity. When the Trinity is, if you can say, angered, it actually turns fortune against those who have angered it. And that happens here at the very opening of the play, where the first witch says that she met the sailor's wife, and the sailor's wife refused to give her chestnuts. And because of that, the sailor's wife is now going to suffer by having her husband, who's gone to the siege of Aleppo, a battleground at the time of Shakespeare's era. He's gone to the siege of Aleppo, and this witch is going to go and starve him, make his ship unable to move, so the sailor and all the other sailors on board the ship die slow, awful deaths of starvation and of thirst. There's a line in here that's particularly important to notice. Shakespeare, being a poet, frequently uses language to convey his meaning through the very texture of the language. And we'll look here at the texture of the language, where the witch says, the wife was eating chestnuts, and she munched and munched and munched. Give me, quoth I, aroint thee, witch, the rump-fed runyon cries. Notice here the munched, 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 triune imagery, but then aroint thee, witch, the sound of the R's, rump-fed runyon. Those sounds, mum, 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 and are pig-like sounds. And so the wife is equated with pigs or pig imagery, which is appropriate because the second witch has just said, I've been off killing swine. Now, from that fickleness of those witches, we move to the scene of Macbeth and Banquo, and the very first lines out of Macbeth's mouth. So foul and fair a day I have not seen. Remember back in scene 1, foul is fair is foul, and foul is fair, which is a twisting or troping of the natural world. The very same sentiments are echoed out of the mouth here of Macbeth. So that Macbeth is already a man who's somewhat unnatural. He's a little bit off from the natural world. Banquo, his companion, who is the other swimmer in this scene, asks the practical questions. How far to Forres? How far to the camp of Duncan? And he also is the one who immediately sees the witches and notices the witches and addresses them before Macbeth does. The witches hail Macbeth and say, you're going to be, we know you're Glamis, you're going to be Cawdor, and after that you're going to be king. And Banquo immediately notices that this is shocking to Macbeth. Why? Because Macbeth has already thought about this. He's already thought about, maybe I should be king, maybe not Duncan. But how does he get there? To get to be king, he's going to have to kill a couple people, namely the son of Duncan and Duncan himself, because the kingship is not going to come to him naturally. So when the witches proclaim him Cawdor, he thinks, well, that's never going to happen, is it? I'm never going to be Cawdor. But then almost immediately afterwards, when they're joking about, oh, how funny that is, your children are going to be kings, along come Ross and Angus, and they say, you're Thane of Cawdor. Which means that Macbeth realizes, if the witches spoke true about that, maybe they're correct about the kingship too. He says, well, the worst is already behind me, right? The most difficult hurdle, which is the hurdle of prophecy being accurate, is already behind. And now I might actually be able to be the king himself. And maybe if chance is going to make me king, I don't have to do anything at all. I'll just be ushered into the kingship. Won't that be nice? I have all the power and the wealth of the kingship without having to lift a single finger. But that is not the case. And it turns out that we find Macbeth has to do a great deal to get to the kingship, and his ambition drives him towards that kingship. If these witches are correct, and I'm Thane of Cawdor now, I should be king. I deserve to be king. I ought to be king. And thus we have from the very start this triune imagery, planting in the mind of Macbeth this idea that maybe he might not have had or might not have come to fruition otherwise. they begin transforming him, transfiguring him. And by his ambition and by his will, he transforms himself even further. Let's look at the next scene and read together the next scene. We go back to the forest, the camp of Duncan. And in this scene, we have Duncan and his sons, Malcolm and Donalbain. And Malcolm and Donalbain receive an award, and Macbeth receives a lesser award, and he's very angered by that because he's been promised to be king. He can't be king given the award that Malcolm receives from Duncan. Let's read the text together.